The imposing Karuma Dam, built inside the bowels of the earth in Kiriandongo district, is part of the regime's energy pet projects to light up every pocket of the country and spur an industrial revolution. Due for completion in December this year, the dam will add another 600 megawatts on the national grid of 1,782 megawatts, as Uganda will enjoy a surplus in power. According to UEGCL, which oversees power generation, demand for power at a national scale averages 500 megawatts, which means the turbines will be kept on low scale to produce only what can be consumed or exported. However, construction of the 3 high-voltage lines for evacuation of power from Karuma to several locations of the country, including facilitating export to South Sudan, is way behind schedule and beset by numerous challenges. Which means for now, the few who consume the available power have to pay for it expensively in order to offset huge investment costs in form of debt servicing. Both Karuma and Isimba Dam, which was commissioned earlier in March, cost a combined 6.7 trillion shillings, 80% of the money, a loan from China's Exim Bank, payable over a 15-year period. Auditor General John Mwanga warned earlier this year that UEGCL shall not realize sufficient funds from energy sales to meet the loan repayments. Policy officials in the Ministries of Finance and Energy acknowledge this problem, which means ultimately the bigger burden of loan repayment will be borne by taxpayers. But others fear that the dams are a bellwether for political legitimacy. The loans for the 2 dams from China, like other Chinese loan bankrolled projects, have become a key talking point, especially in light of the heavy conditionalities tied to them. Some economists and the Auditor General John Mwanga have concluded that these conditions are stringent, while China itself is accused of strangulating developing countries in a vicious cycle of debt. Some of the conditions, according to a confidential audit of Uganda's debt, include the loans being tied to particular suppliers or contractors, which distorts local content and how much Uganda actually receives, payment of all legal fees without a cap and insurance premiums up to 7.4% or 31 billion shillings on behalf of the lender, and the opening of needless escrow accounts, which distorts government's cash flow. According to the audit, Uganda was required by China's Exim Bank to open escrow accounts with Stanbic Bank, where the government is obliged to deposit funds over the tenure of the loan to cover the high annual interest and fees under the agreement as a security in case of default. As of June last year, the escrow accounts for all major Exim Bank funded projects, among others the expansion of Entebbe Airport, Isimba and Karuma Dams, National Infrastructure Backbone and Kampala Entebbe Expressway, held more than 150 billion shillings. According to the audit, this means that because government has no control over the escrow accounts and does not earn interest from these bank balances, it distorts the Treasury's cash flow and monetary control policy. The most stringent condition, perhaps, is the waiver of sovereign immunity over all its properties and itself from enforcement of any form of judgment. This means that in the likely event of default or delay to pay, the lender has the right to take possession of assets of their liking to recoup their investments. Earlier on this year, at a hastily called press conference to allay fears about Uganda's debt situation, following revelations by the Auditor General's report submitted to Parliament, Finance Minister Matia Kasaija said the Chinese cannot take possession of Uganda's property.
China taking over assets? I don't know. I have heard, but in Uganda I've told you, as long as some of us are still in charge, unless there is a really catastrophe, in which I don't see at all, that will make this economy going behind, I want to assure you people and assure the country, the economy is now on
Later, Kasaija wrote to President Museveni, raising a red flag about conditions tied to China's loans, warning that given what is happening in our peer countries as regard to China debt, we strongly believe we should protect our assets from possible takeover. Kasaija's alarm came on the heels of reports late last year that China was planning to take over management of Mombasa Port next door in Kenya as a trade-off for the huge loan portfolio, including the standard gauge railway, which is fast becoming a white elephant. This is the fear that as Uganda sinks deeper into debt, it will become beholden to the lender and its assets will be staked as collateral. At a joint press conference with the visiting Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who was chief guest at Uganda's 57th Independence Day celebrations earlier this month, President Museveni defended borrowing.
The Chinese, whom you seem to be very excited against, because you are being influenced by some other people, are the only ones who have agreed to lend us money to develop the railway in Kenya and in Tanzania, to develop the electricity.
Uganda's total public debt stock, according to the recently released Bank of Uganda's State of Economy report, stood at a staggering 47 trillion shillings, or 43.2%, as the nominal value of the size of the economy as at June this year. Of the entire total debt stock, Ministry of Finance records show $4.2 billion or 15.4 trillion shillings is domestic debt and $8.3 billion or 30 trillion shillings is external debt. By the end of this financial year next June, according to the ministry's forecasts, the nominal value of debt as a percentage of the size of the economy is expected to soar to 47%, on account of 20 loans due for approval and subsequently clock 50% in the financial year 2021-2022. Godfred Datemwa, the Commissioner for Debt Policy and Issuance Department in the Finance Ministry, told NTV that the country's debt position is not worrying despite the narrowing headroom.
Inevitably, the stock had to go up, but it has not reached the agreed East African Monetary Union Protocol threshold of 55%, though the headroom remains a little smaller. The comforting thing is that we are supposed, by way of debt management, we shall go now slow in acquiring big infrastructure project loans, and that means it will start falling.
The increment in Uganda's debt stock is largely attributed to disbursements from China's Exim Bank on account of financing Karuma and Isimba dams and World Bank loans, as well as foreign exchange rate variations. China ranks as Uganda's top bilateral lender with about 75%, followed by France, the UK, which is financing construction of the Kabale International Airport in Hoima, and Japan, which financed the New Jinja Cable Bridge, when combined accounts for 25%. But in general, the debt stock is largely from multilateral lenders like the World Bank and African Development Bank Group. So why is China's debt the most worrying?
The reason is that mainly Chinese have picked up most of the big projects. So the share of China within bilateral is quite high, understandably high.
Out of the total external debt stock, there's a portfolio of loans amounting to $4.2 billion or 15 trillion shillings that are unabsorbed or money that has not been spent for years, which government blames on challenges like procurement and land compensation. Foreign exchange fluctuations increased the debt by 2 trillion shillings as at June last year, up from 820 billion shillings in 2017. The debt audit shows that government does not have a strategy that would protect the country against foreign exchange risks as a result of debt dominated in foreign currency. In September, President Museveni issued a new directive on borrowing for infrastructure, limiting it for only railway construction, electricity generation and irrigation schemes, strategic road projects for oil and tourism, and some aspects of the education and health sector. Later, the president contradicted himself by scuttling procurement for the proposed 4 trillion shillings Kampala-Jinja Expressway, which was conceived as a public-private partnership venture, by inviting a Chinese company to bid for the project. The Chinese company, China Railway 17th Bureau Group Company, told the president that it will use its money to construct the road and recoup its investments in 30 years. This as government starts servicing the 1.2 trillion shillings loan from China, which was acquired to construct the Kampala-Entebbe Expressway on the premise that the road would pay back for itself through toll gate fees, which hasn't materialized yet. Finance Ministry policy documents detail that Uganda expects the first tranche of the $8.1 trillion loan from China to finance construction of the first leg of the standard gauge railway in the financial year 2021-2022.
You look at the economic growth within 6% and above. It's not accidental. When you look at Uganda making export surpluses in the region, close to $500 million in the region, we're in surplus within the Eastern region, not only East Africa, but Eastern region, we're in surplus. It means something has triggered off these exports, and the exports translate into economic growth. You get the foreign exchange, but you also get money to service your loans. All this is economic development.
While Uganda's debt level remains at low risk of distress, the International Monetary Fund mission, during a country assessment in May, cautioned that debt metrics had weakened and some investment projects may not generate the envisaged return, yet interest payments are rising. For instance, the country dropped 5 places in the 2019 World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index from the 122nd place last year to 127th place in 2019. Uganda was also ranked amongst the worst in the Getting Electricity Index at 175, scoring 34%, a decrease from 2017 where it scored 34.1%.
Tell you, the debt GDP ratio of Uganda is very good. It's not a problem. If it was to go beyond that, I am somebody who knows what I'm doing. When I wanted to borrow for the railway, I had agreed with some of the Chinese companies to borrow for the Ayago Dam. But when it became the railway and the dam, I said, no, let the dam wait. Let's just concentrate on the railway.
But Paul Lacuna, a research fellow at the Economic Policy Research Center at Makerere University, says debt should be looked at qualitatively and quantitatively.
Look at all these statistics wholesomely to be able to say our debt is sustainable. But just looking at the IMF indicator, we still have a lot of legroom. But we, given our policy and institutional environment, and other indicators such as the doing business environment, doing business assessment, we need to be careful how much we contract going forward. 50%, some countries are in debt distress at 50%. Many others are not, even at 100%.
Lacuna opines that with the recent rebasing of the economy, it gave the country some marginal legroom to borrow. Earlier on this month, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics announced that the size of Uganda's economy is now 122 trillion shillings after factoring in recent investments in the oil and gas sector, up from 110 trillion shillings. As the economy grows, so does the debt appetite, but the IMF warns that vulnerability levels continue to increase, and 1 in 5 shillings collected in revenue will be spent on interest payment this financial year. Notwithstanding, there's a litany of qualitative issues such as the low revenue mobilization, the ever-expanding cost of public administration, high population growth, corruption that government must deal with as it tries to tame the current debt. Julius Kapwepwe of Uganda Debt Network told NTV that government is not transparent about debt.
In Uganda is often suppressed. The consideration of disbursed and outstanding debt, or DOD, is mainly where the calculation by government looks at, without consideration of the undisbursed debt. If I give you 10,000 shillings on your account, you pick 7, I am still counting the 3 on you, 3,000 that is on the account on you. So when you are paying back, you need to pay back the entire money plus the interest thereof. Whether you have used it or not is not my business as a lender.
Another sticky issue, according to Kapwepwe, is government's deviation from the development plan.
Expanded economy provides an opportunity for Uganda to reduce speed and scale on borrowing, so that then the parameters perhaps can perform a bit better than the stress situation that we otherwise are getting into.
The current frenzy of borrowing was initially premised on account that the country would start commercial oil production by 2023 and rely on the petrodollars to pay back the loans. However, the ongoing strife between government and oil companies pushed back oil production to the earliest possibly in 2025 or much later. Yet government has to borrow more to invest in infrastructure such as the refinery and oil pipeline to facilitate oil production, which means that the country will slide into debt distress at some point. According to the Ministry of Finance records, at least 27 loans are due for repayment starting next year. In the current budget, debt repayment was allocated 2.9 trillion shillings, which is the second largest share of the entire budget. Debt is not inherently good or bad. The key thing about debt is for it to be used the right way and to cap it when it threatens to spiral out of control.